And Senator Bennet, Michael, Zoom is so informal. Thank you. Thank you so much for being making time for us. We know how busy you've been and how crucial these days have been. So before I say anything else, thank you for, I'm sure you've had hardly enough sleep and have had to deal with all kinds of new information coming in literally almost moment by moment. I thought if you want to just give us kind of a rough sketch of your week of, what was what was in the relief bill that the Senate passed earlier this week, but how rapidly was your week changing?
It looks like we might have lost Senator Bennet, maybe a Wi-Fi connection. Sorry about that.
It's a good thing that he has such a good sense of direction, so we know that we'll be able to get it back.
That's right.
Anyway, and I have had a chance to talk to him a couple times. And as soon as I get him back on, as soon as I see his picture on the screen, I'll get him back on. But clearly, this is the moment where the Senate should be acting with unity.
Sorry.
Oh, you're back. Let me turn it back over to you.
I'm back. So I don't know if you can see me or if that's lousy.
I can hear you.
But the bill, the initial bill that we passed was to make sure that we increased Medicaid for states, and we made sure that the tests were available for everybody at no cost, to make sure that state employment insurance offices were set up to deal with a flood of claims, food assistance for seniors and others. I think we seem to have lost you again.
No, that's okay. I can see you. I hear you.
Okay, good. And I think that was all a good first step, but we've got much, much more to do. And we're right in the middle tonight of a negotiation between Mitch McConnell and the Republicans and the Democrats. And I'm hopeful that we'll end up with a product that has, at least 30 Democratic votes and 30 Republican votes, that we can put the partisanship behind us and actually move the country forward. We've got some really severe challenges on the healthcare side of things. What's become clear is that we've got a national shortage of what they call PPE, personal protection equipment, which are masks and gloves and gowns that we don't have enough of, and we don't know. We haven't seen the supply chain kick in the way that it needs to. And then there's an issue all over the country around tests, as you know, John, where they're coming back in 8 or 9 days, or maybe sometimes 24 hours, when the standard has been set by South Korea at 4 hours. The reason that matters, among other things, is that when you're a healthcare worker and you show symptoms, even if you don't have the coronavirus symptoms or the coronavirus, you can't know that until you get the test results back. So you get sidelined, maybe unnecessarily, and there's a real threat to our healthcare workforce as a result. This bill today is going to spend about $1 trillion at least as a combination of direct payments to individuals to try to mitigate for the lost wages that they have, a strengthening of the unemployment provisions. We're never going to have seen mass unemployment like what we're going to see today, and what we're going to see going over the next 24 hours, I think, is a negotiation about how robust the stuff is on the side of displaced workers on the one hand, and how robust it is with respect to businesses. Of course, in some ways it's the same thing, because what we're trying to do is basically forestall a complete economic dislocation. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, well, obviously you've got your hands full, and it's good if you can get 30 votes from both sides. That'll be a sign of reassurance, or will be a reassuring sign for not people just in Colorado, but around the country.
I mean, what do you think? You're a business person. What as you look at this, what's coming to your mind?
Well, I've been through trying to when you go through tough times in any small business, and trying to make payroll is always your first concern. How do you make sure that people who they've got to pay rent, they've got to, put bread on the table. You've always got to put them first. That's the essential of service. And we're creating we're in a situation it is out there that we put our small businesses in a position where they can't do that. I know of 2 different restaurant owners in Denver. One of them laid off 500 people on Tuesday, and the other laid off 700 people on Wednesday. And these are people that I bet they've never laid off, more than 10 people in a month between all their restaurants in their existence. So I think that's a big issue. And I think the other thing, we have to recognize that our first responders are not just police and fire, the people that are, selling us groceries and making sure that food gets packaged, and the pharmacists that are putting together pharmaceutical, prescription drugs, and the people that are then selling them to us. These people now are all first responders in their own right, and I think have to be treated as such. And that's a very different universe than what we've been in before. I think without question.
Yeah, the universality of this is unlike anything that we've seen. And except I suppose in sort of more limited natural disaster circumstances where everything shuts down for weeks because of a hurricane comes through, or an earthquake. But the difference here, of course, is that it's going to affect the whole country one way or another at really roughly the same time. It feels like it's not the same time because we're lagging, and you can see that New York and California and Washington State have borne the brunt of it, but it's coming quickly everywhere else.
Well, it's hard to measure where the intensity is greatest, just because we've had so little testing. I think if we get more testing, we'll see with much more clarity where the real problems are.
Yeah, and I think I'm optimistic that at some point we're going to have the number of tests we need produced. The thing I worry about is whether it's going to be in time to help us level this spike out, and in time for us to be able to make sure our healthcare workforce is able to spend the time they need to spend on the front lines. It's a real concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you or get a couple questions that were submitted from some of our participants today. And again, let me just say, I appreciate you not just being on this Zoom call, but the incredible amount of time and hours you've been putting in the last couple of weeks on this thing. So let's have a couple questions. Chris from Denver asks, what is the best thing we as individuals can be doing to help solve this crisis?
I would say, without a doubt, do what you can to social distance from other people, so that we can try to keep this, as best we can from spiking, and try to flatten the curve, as they say. And that means staying at home. It means not going to work unless you are one of those first responders that John was talking about. It means keeping your distance from other people, and while you do that, try to keep a positive attitude about what everybody's going through right now. Everybody's going through it at the same time, and if we can be positive through this challenge, I think that's also really important too.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I got a question here from Gloria from Grand Junction, and she's asking, how will she's asking me, I guess, how will you be campaigning without doing in-person events? And how can your supporters help without going door to door? And this is, I think everybody, this is the first experience for me, and I think for almost everyone, in a truly virtual campaign. Digital's become more important over the years and over the last 5 or 10 years, and increasingly more important in 2016, 2018. At least for the next couple months, this is going to be pretty much a purely virtual campaign. So things like these kinds of video conferencing, this is a Zoom, but there are other products out there. But how do we connect with people in such a way that we can not just pass along information, but so that we can, connect with people emotionally. Humans are so incredibly social creatures. I mean, that's why movie theaters are still successful, despite you can stream anything in your TV set. But at least before COVID-19 came along, many people would still go and would rather have a cinematic experience in a theater. So in terms of how our supporters can help us, I think we need more people finding different ways to connect with people, and not just on phone calls, but using social media and Facebook and Instagram, doing chats like this, teleconferencing. All of these things have to be integrated in a way that the campaign gets momentum. We can't let it lag just because we can't be face to face with people. And we're going to need everybody to help us do that, Gloria. And I'm going to take your question as a volunteer. That you're volunteering for this. Let me see that next question. Martin from Aurora asks, I'm so mad that the Trump administration didn't adequately prepare for this pandemic. We need new leadership in Washington to lead our recovery from this crisis. Once the immediate health crisis is over, what will you both do as senators in Washington to help our nation's economy recover? Michael, why don't you go first?
Sure. I mean, I think that it is a really good illustration of why having a reality TV star be president may not be the best idea. We were not as prepared as we should have been for this. And I don't want to get into the business right now of casting stones. There'll be the opportunity to do that later. But leadership does matter. This is not a game. It's not a reality TV show. And this democracy of ours needs people leading it that are committed to the democracy. And I've worried for a long time, not just because of Donald Trump being elected, because I actually view him much more as a symptom of our issues than as the cause of our issues. I've been really worried about our democracy failing. And a part of it, John, is the social media that you talked about earlier. It's not obvious to me that social media shouldn't have been a great democratizing force in the world and in our country. I mean, an opportunity for everybody to be on a town hall, something like this, to raise their voices and to let their elected leaders know what they were thinking about. And unfortunately, it really, up till now, has kind of propped up tyrants, both here and abroad. And by the way, maybe that's something that we can figure out during this crisis, is how to connect virtually in a way that actually supports our ability to govern, rather than in a way that just polarizes people further, because I think that's not what we need. I think, to answer your question specifically about how we're going to recover in this economy going forward and what we're going to do, first of all, leadership really matters. Having the right people in these jobs makes a big difference. I think we're going to look back after this and we're going to say to ourselves, why did we, since 2001, decide that we ought to borrow $5 trillion from the Chinese so we could give tax cuts to the wealthiest people in America? You know, maybe it wasn't a great idea to spend $5.6 trillion in 2 wars in the Middle East that lasted 20 years. And that's 11 or 12 or 13 trillion dollars we could have invested in our economy and did not. And we didn't at a time when, you know, we had an economy that was working well for the people at the very top, but not for everybody else. That suggests to me that after this is done and people see the damage that was caused by not being ready, by not having the investments in our infrastructure, in our physical capital and our human capital, I hope that we'll begin to invest in our country again, and that will be critical to the economic recovery from this, but also critical for us to have an economy that when it grows for everybody, not just the people at the very top.
Well, and I think as you grow that economy, there's got to be a recognition that resiliency matters. And resiliency is a form of infrastructure in itself, and that we need to build back clearly what is, you give the massive tax cut that President Trump delivered in 2017, that came out of resources that were intended to be, part of the muscle that prepares us for a crisis like this. And when we don't have that reservoir of resources available, then you end up with the kind of, the real problems we've seen over the last couple of months. And I think I'm more angry than Michael is. Michael's probably just more gracious, but I am so upset. I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime where we have had such a graphic example of bad leadership and what the consequences mean to people from all walks of life. The world has changed for so many people in ways we're only beginning to learn. In terms of how do we rebuild the economy, we've got to make sure that there's capital. That we know that businesses are in many cases going to be starting from scratch. We know that people need jobs. And one thing we learned from the Great Depression, if you go back and look at that history, is you can't just nurture things along. We're going to have to find ways to rebuild the capital markets, but also make sure that there's a market for the consumer products that, whether you like it or not, to a large extent, our country's economy depends on now. So stimulating those, making sure that we have both the capital and the labor, and that as Michael said, that we're treating the labor fairly, that they're getting paid enough so that they can, get back to some level of normalcy for their lives. I think that's going to be crucial.
Think about that tax, John, that tax cut that you talked about that Trump pushed through and said that it was a middle-class tax cut, even though almost all the benefit went to the wealthiest people in the country. When you think about it in sort of local terms, you were the mayor of Denver, I was your chief of staff then, and was then the superintendent of schools, so we both worked at the local level. What Donald Trump did is literally the equivalent of the mayor of a town in Colorado, Denver, Boulder, Grand Junction, Aurora, whatever town, saying to the people that he worked for, we're going to borrow more money than we've ever borrowed before. And you say, okay, well, that worries me a little. What are you going to spend the money on? Are you going to spend it on roads and bridges? No. Are you going to spend it on education? No. Are you going to spend it on, retrofitting our built infrastructure so that we're dealing with climate change in a meaningful way? No. Are you going to spend it on mental health or addiction treatment? No. What are you going to spend it on? And if the answer was, I'm going to take the proceeds of that loan and give it to, the two wealthiest neighborhoods in the city or the town, you would say, what are you smoking? But that's what Donald Trump did. And that's what, the Republican presidents in 2001 have done with $5 trillion. And we got to stop doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's see. We've got a couple minutes. A quick question. Obviously, it's going to be important over these next months to support local businesses. And I don't know if you've got restaurants out there, Michael, that you're going to try and get food to go. I trust you saw that Governor Polis this morning made it available so that restaurants that are closed but do provide food to go, they can also provide liquor to go. So things like, what is that? Sorry about that. That's Robin's phone. But anyway, they can provide. You can go to a restaurant now and get a pitcher of margaritas to go. which will help. I mean, that's a little thing, and it's, you know, we can make jokes about it, but it's the kind of thing that helps a restaurant keep a couple people employed and maybe help get them through this thing. So anyway, I don't know if you've got restaurants out there. I know that in our neighborhood here in Park Hill, we've got a restaurant called Tables and Cherry Tomato and our local delicatessen Spinelli's. We're going to try and keep picking up food from them as much as possible. Have you got anybody in Washington, Michael?
Yeah, I just think that's really important. I probably shouldn't say this to you because it may make you less enthusiastic about the job, but usually I microwave something here for dinner, and I can't do that now, obviously. And so, yeah, I actually have been eating better than I have been in a long time. And it's, I've downloaded 2 or 3 of those apps that allows you to use local restaurants, and it is critical. I mean, that's how people are keeping the lights on. And by the way, those guys, the food workers in the restaurants, the people that are delivering the food, those guys are first line workers, just like the ones you were talking about earlier. And it's critical for us to support those businesses.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think those small businesses are the heart of communities, and they're going to be the heart of our recovery as well.
I'm going to turn the light on, John. I realize it's just dark.
I kind of liked it. It reminded me of film noir.
How's that?
I thought maybe a knife was going to come out of there and plunge into your chest.